These boots are to northern Mozambique what the burning McDonald's is to the Los Angeles fires. The reason you saw wall-to-wall coverage of the LA fires, and yet still haven't heard about this incident in East Africa from November 2021, is because LA is one of the richest neighborhoods on the planet. Northern Mozambique is one of the poorest. Both of these are stories of communities and lives that have been devastated by the kind of climate shocks that are hitting us thick and fast, following decades of uncontrolled and reckless carbon pollution. This shapes whose story gets told, whose doesn't, and why. It determines who the lead characters are in these desperate dramas, and who disappears into the negative spaces between them on the global stage of geopolitics. These are my boots. To be precise, these are my boots in November 2021, being airlifted out of the Niassa Special Reserve in northern Mozambique. We're fleeing some bandits who are moving through the bush below, armed with hand-me-down Kalashnikovs and murderous intent. Some call them militants. Some call them Islamic insurgents. It's hard to tease apart the truth from this vantage point. I'm here as part of a high-profile international magazine team, and our plan is to spend nearly a month near a village called Mbamba in the south of the reserve, where we'll embed ourselves for a few weeks to learn about the old ways of the indigenous Yao people. We'll visit local sacred pools to document a days-long ceremony where worshippers plead with their ancestors for happiness, health, and abundance. We'll watch how a 20-something honey collector scales the bole of a Leviathan-sized baobab that is easily half a century old, so he can gather chunks of golden, sugary comb hanging beneath the canopy. We'll document how he uses a tree climbing method that's been handed down from grandfather to son. We'll see how the Yao's barter and trade economy persists, although in a modified way, how they still partly live off the abundance of the woodlands and rivers, collecting honey, fruit, and nuts, firewood and medicinal plants, and catching fish. How they've added crops to the mix, growing fields of maize, peanuts, beans, sesame, sorghum, and tobacco. How they live in general harmony with the big game that share the same footpaths. That's the plan, but the advancing bandits scupper things. We wake one Saturday to hear that the insurgents are 40 clicks away and that the Mozambican special forces are on their way to put a stop to things. In 24 hours, the area will likely turn into a war zone. We have 10 minutes to decide. Do we call in an evacuation plane, or do we dig in and hope the firefight will pass us by? We decide it's best to leave. We aren't war correspondents after all. We're here to tell a conservation story. It's only 2 years later that I find out the connection between this evac and an extreme weather event. That's when the Red Cross Red Crescent releases a special report that links the escalating political instability in nearby Cabo Delgado province with 2 record-breaking cyclones that hit the African East Coast in the summer of 2019. The area was already a tinderbox of discontent in 2017, after decades of civil war, state neglect, and now the government appearing to hand mining rights to foreign businesses, cutting the locals out of the profits. The decision to forcibly move about 800 families to make way for a port development with no compensation seems to have been the spark that finally set things alight. The Red Cross report documents the skirmishes that start between some rabble-rousers and the constabulary in a port town in Cabo Delgado. It shows the dabs of digital red ink on a map where each data point marks a noted conflict, or of people uprooting, moving, and resettling. There's a fair number of red flares on the map in 2017 and 2018. but you can count them on two hands. Then Cyclone Idai hits the Mozambican coastline in the southern summer of 2019, flattening 90% of the coastal city of Beira. 6 weeks later, Cyclone Kenneth makes landfall a bit further north, pummeling Cabo Delgado. Both are record-breaking events. The flooding sets thousands of people into motion, forcing them to leave their homes, their lives, their crops, their security. In the midst of this turmoil, the militants get traction. From here, the map is like a time-lapse of fireworks taking off. Explosions of red light up and spread out from a central ignition point. Battles with police and organized acts of violence against civilians go from the tens to the hundreds to over 5,500 in 2022. One of those dots on the map, in late November 2021, correlates directly with our team's emergency evacuation, a spot just 40 or so kilometers away from where we were based and where the special forces were about to be deployed. This story captures better than most the time and geographical scale of the climate crisis and its impacts. The fuse to this disaster is lit generations ago as industrializing countries begin pouring their carbon pollution into the atmosphere. Today, the Cabo Delgado region is already destabilized because of the very forces that allowed those global north countries to muscle up using fossil fuels and other resource extraction. The bomb goes off when the record-breaking cyclones Idai and Kenneth hit back-to-back, both fueled by global north pollution. The shockwave takes 2 years to spread, but our team is on the far edge of its blast radius when it reaches into Niassa in November 2021. More importantly, the people of Mbamba are the ones hit most severely by its force. Overnight, villagers become refugees. The Red Cross Red Crescent writes that this is the first time in Mozambique's recorded history that a drought, a series of severe cyclones and floods occurred consecutively. The unprecedented scale of climate change-induced natural hazards have created a new set of risks, impacts, and drivers in the region. We need to better understand, the report says, how the dynamics of government, conflict, and climate change interact to exacerbate insecurity in a state like Mozambique and in vulnerable regions such as Cabo Delgado. Meanwhile, as northern Mozambique continues to broil, the world pays no attention. This story is riffing off J.M. Coetzee's allegorical novel, Waiting for the Barbarians. Coetzee's allegory of the white minority apartheid state in South Africa leaves us asking, who are the barbarians in all of this? The insurgents with their medieval beheadings and ghoulish acts of Sharia amputations, or the civilization that has been able to amass enormous wealth, power, and privilege on the back of the suffering and exploitation of the global South, creating the very conditions that caused northern Mozambique to explode as it has following the climate bombs of 2 giant cyclones in 2019.